Hello everyone, this is Terrence of the tskjesusfreak.com, and in this video I'm going to talk about, I'm going to do two vlogs today, and in this video specifically I'm going to talk about there's a, like a, the topic of the state of the church in America in specifically 2018, but there's a lot of articles, there's a lot of quote popular articles that's been like written back in like 2013, 2008, from like really 2008 to 2016. But the state of the, not the state of the union, but the state of Christianity within America. Okay, there's not a very specific article out there. There might be an article here and there or a video here and there, but I couldn't find any type of article out there, but the closest one that I found, and probably the most popular one that I found, was this guy who has it's chucklawless.com. And this person, I don't know what his theological background is, but in this specific article, I've read it's just a short little 7 point article, and I'll link it in the description of the video. So um yeah, in this article he basically says like he's looking at it as a revival mindset. Okay. So what okay, so like if we want to, as an American church, if we want to experience a revival, we have to kind of start in-house, so to speak, because what really brought me on to this whole thing, there's a lot of like the state of there's a lot of videos that I've seen over the past couple days that are talking about the state of politics. So I'm going to talk about the state of Christianity, and for vlog 5 and then vlog 6 I'm going to talk about the state of libertarianism as well, which I do kind of have a foot in the door, so to speak, in that section. But anyways, but about this video specifically, so like within the church as a whole, not everyone in the church, but as a whole, we're not really that desperate for God, and which I agree with that, and it's in a very much in a real sense as a macro view of Christianity in America, and it's really hard to be quote desperate for God just because we have all this stuff. Now it's like I know there's churches out there. I'm part of a church that speaks about the need for God, because like logically speak, my church is more logically based. It takes more on that logical based, not necessarily emotionally based Christianity. And there are some pros and cons to be too emotional Christianity and too logical Christianity. If we're just like, but anyways, and so as American church as a whole, we're not really that desperate for God, which is quite clear because some of these points kind of speak to the first point. Okay, and then the second point, this person said, I want to get the name. Does he have the name? I think it's by the actual guy who does the Chuck Lawless. Anyways, and then when we do, and then also we do talk about so we tend to speak about sin of others rather than deal with our own sin. Yes and no. Okay. Now, I do kind of agree with that, but at the same, I don't really agree with that second point, just because I don't even think people are talking about sin within the Christian church as a whole. Um, and when we do talk about sin, they usually talk about sin of others because that's from the pulpit. Okay, so if it's not, so like the issue I have with this particular point is that um we tend to so like what is preached in the pulpit might be different than what the actual pastor and his family is dealing with. So I'm gonna give you an example. If there's um a lot of people are cheating amongst each other in a sexual way within the church, and so um and so in that church, okay, church A has a lot of sexual sins, specifically a married, specifically having affairs and whatnot, and so, but he and his wife has never had a problem with that, and like never even remotely have a problem with that in their relationship. But apparently, in this particular stage of this particular church, whatever that particular church is, this is just an example. Um, there's a lot of he's been discovering a lot of affairs happening within the church, and so and then he addresses that in the church, and so in a form of a sermon series or some kind of like way like probably just do it as a sermon or a sermon series about that particular issue, and so yeah, and that's when you are okay. Then that means you are in a position of being okay with stopping where you're at and then preach a sermon series of adultery within the church. And so, if that is the case of a church or whatever X issue is I'm just throwing that as an example. And so, um, so that aspect is it depends on how he's getting at. I guess he's talking about like the individual church people, individual church matters are pointing the finger at other people, but they're not pointing the fingers to themselves. I mean, that's kind of what I'm getting at this particular. But it just seems to me that the pastor needs to talk about the issues of that particular church. Okay. And what that church is going through. So if you're going through persecution or if you're going through some kind of type of sin, that he needs to be addressing that, and the church elders need to be addressing that as well. Okay, so that's point 2 out of the 7, and then I do really think that point 3 on this article is spot on. We find happiness in our stuff. Now, for me, I try to basically kind of limit my personal items necessarily, or not be that emotionally attached to those items. So like, I buy stuff to make my apartment as a red oriented theme. I just buy stuff to put stuff into my apartment, but I'm not necessarily emotionally attached to it either. I was the only and so and stuff like that, and so like I'm not necessarily emotionally attached to it. Like I can just like it's just stuff. It's like really the only thing that I really need is a laptop, cell phone, and cell phone, and the accessories of those things. So like the mouse, power cord, and a $20 headphones, earbuds or whatever, and then that's all I would need in my legal papers and whatnot, like stuff that I actually need, and so we don't find happiness. We find happiness in our stuff, but in the so yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on that, and he's pretty much key on this particular point. I completely agree that the church as a whole in America, we have too much stuff. Now, So I don't personally have a desire to have a big house with a nice fancy car and whatnot. Um, and I do fall into that trap sometimes in terms of like, ooh, I want this one, or I want this one, or that's another reason why I skip on the Key 2, um, the BlackBerry Key 2. I still have the BlackBerry Key 1. That's one of the reasons why. That's not the only reason why, but another big reason of mine is going from the Key 1 to Key 2, and then the Key 3, and then doing a more of a resource management type of viewpoint. But anyways, this is why I skipped it. I don't want to have to use up more resources than we actually need as a macro view. I know it's just me personally doing it, but yeah. Okay, so point 4, we know little of the Word of God and often less about church history. Yes, I completely agree with that point as well. Which is why I think if people actually knew what the Word of God, like, if more people knew about the Word of God a lot more extensively, that would probably actually create a going away Christianity part of like, oh, this is what we're actually meant to live this out, and so that's kind of why. And then if they even know, okay, even let alone they know the Word of God, often less about the church history. And so do I have perfect or near perfect knowledge of the Word of God? No, I don't know the Word of God as much as I should. But I'm in that process, and it's a continuous process for my whole life to actually know the Word of God. So am I gonna be like a John MacArthur or an R.C. Sproul type of it? No, that's not my calling in life. To be an R.C. Sproul or a John MacArthur. Clearly, I'm in the wrong field. But and then also less about church history. And so like I'm very big on like knowing the Word of God and also knowing church history, because there's a lot of things that in church history, the reason why we are today is because of church history. Okay, that's point 4. Point 5 is we have to feel preserving, patient, and prayer. Okay, so prayer. Yeah, prayer is another thing. And in some of my circles, prayer is like in the circles that I've been encountering, prayer is less of an like is lesser of a need than like the Word of God. So like the Word of God is like way up here, and then like prayer is kind of down on the line, because I've personally seen prayer as not necessarily, I've seen prayer done the wrong way, so to speak. And so I have not a negative view on prayer, but like a like that's something that I would probably need to work on better, is prayer. And so that point I agree with, even in my own life. So yeah, like there, yeah. So anyways, number 6 is we can grow churches without the power of God. So yeah, this is a very good example of we can definitely grow churches without God, basically, and because there's a lot of people. Okay. Yeah, because church members doesn't really matter. You can have like 1,000 people going, being a member of a church and giving money every month to that church, but that church is only as good as actual participating members of that church. So participating member meaning they're going to church, they're going to the services, they're being plugged into a Bible study small group type of thing, and they're doing this, they're being actively involved in the community of the church in more ways than just the in more of a way, in more ways than just going to church. Okay, like going to church on Sunday. Okay, and then and then the seventh one is kind of a summary of all six of them. We're probably not ready to pay the cost of revival, which means like we'd have to be in a situation like I think in order to have revival in the United States of America and just Western countries as a whole, like we probably need to have like intense persecution, because if we have intense persecution, people have to actually make up their minds on Christianity. Now I know in California and New York, the more liberal a society is in terms of politics and whatnot, the more liberal a society is, the more you actually need to pay the cost of actually being a Christian. So like, oh, you are a Christian. Oh, okay. So, or you can't just kind of like the beauty of living in a more of a secularized culture is that you actually know if somebody's proclaiming to be a Christian, you're pretty much know that that person is actual Christian instead of like the Bible Belt, for example, because the Bible Belt is still culturally acceptable to be a Christian, and so if it's culturally unacceptable to be a Christian, like most of church history, true believers are almost always being persecuted. Not all the time, like today, and in the past like 200, 300 years, 400 years, ever since the Reformation, really, where true believers can actually like freely believe and live out their actual convictions. Anyways, so that's kind of my thought process of this particular article. I do have a few issues with the article, but there are just few and far between. But yeah, there's not really the state of the union type of address for like Christianity in 2018 or this past year. It's kind of like the same old the past like 5-year trend or whatever, and it just seems to get worse and worse and worse in some sections. And so, I mean, I guess the churches that would probably stay churched overall would be more of the theologically sound churches. And I obviously am going to a theologically sound church, otherwise I wouldn't be there, or I would be in a transitioning mode of getting out of a non-theologically sound church. And yes, there are a lot of churches out there that are not theologically sound, or if they are, quote, theologically sound, they're off the rocker, so to speak. Anyways, that is the video for vlog 5, and thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.